call this regular meeting of council to order. And if I can have everyone please rise for the national anthem. Okay, and I'll now ask if there are any disclosures of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Okay, seeing none, we don't have any delegations tonight, and before we get to presentations, I just want to mention that we will be moving into closed session after council. We have received an item of correspondence regarding labor relations, and it's correspondence from CUPE, so we will be moving into closed session at the end of the meeting to discuss that. So I just wanted to let everybody know that that has been added. So as I said, no delegations, but we do have one presentation tonight, and before I move over to the middle of the room, the presentation is for the Niagara Community Paramedic Program and the Wainfleet Community Response Unit. So as you know, I think it was back around 2013 that we were very fortunate to have public health designate a community paramedic here in the township, and it was originally more related to response times within the community, but it was a pilot project. I believe that it was somewhere out in the East Coast that they had implemented this program. So in areas where there weren't a lot of calls, they would have the paramedics in their downtime go out and visit residents with any kind of health issues, aging seniors and so forth. And so they decided to try that here. And so it's been a huge success. And I was just talking to our community paramedics before the meeting started and letting them know that not only did Sherry Rougen come and do the presentation and want to acknowledge all their work and efforts and how incredibly valuable they are in the community, but also a lady by the name of Veda Horner last year had something that I happened to see on Facebook with regard to her mother, and I don't know what the issue was, but that had it not been for the relationship established between her mother and the community paramedics, she thought it would have been a very different outcome. So the media heard Sherry's presentation. I guess that was the last council meeting, or maybe it was the one before, last council meeting. And then, of course, we reached out to Niagara EMS. So we have Chief Smith here and Deputy Chief Farron here. So we just want to say that how much we appreciate it. And I know the community really appreciates it and all your work. And I know in the beginning, too, there was a lot of effort on your part to go and get to know the people in the community. And I know earlier on, and I think there might have been some different paramedics at the time, but there was an effort made to go to the Avondale in different establishments and kind of get a feel for the community. And so you can really see that it's paying off, and we really, really appreciate it. And it's really kind of moving us forward. And I think we're becoming known for having that service in the community, and I think it's going to set a higher standard moving forward. And of course, we know some of the issues we have with the healthcare system, and so it takes the pressure off the healthcare system and gives people in the rural area kind of the service that they might not usually get because they have to travel so far. So it's really special and unique to our community, and we thank you so much, because we can tell that you've really taken Wainfleet as your own. You really are a part of the community, and that really shows. So I know I know my remarks aren't even doing justice to how much of a benefit it's been to our community. So having said that, I'm going to go to the front and just give you a small token of appreciation. And I do see the Russians are here tonight. So again, I want to thank them for bringing it to our attention. And I just think it's such a great story. We tend to hear more of the negative. And so I think this is just wonderful. And like I say, I'm glad the chief and deputy came out tonight as well, all the way to Wainfleet. So I will stop and come on out, and we'll get a picture if that's okay, and we'll go from there. All right, so thank you again. We really appreciate it. This was very nice, and I know we'll run into you guys out on the roads, the rural roads. Okay, so we will move along then. We do have a public hearing this evening. So I believe I will just read all this, and then I will hand it over to the planner. So we have the public meeting. It's file number Z02-2018, and the applicants are Mark and Teresa Wagter. And the purpose of the meeting, in accordance with the Planning Act, a public meeting is held for applicants to present their proposal to the public and council, to receive comments and answer questions that the public and members of council may have. Staff and council will not make a recommendation or decision on the proposal at a public meeting. A planning report will be brought forward by staff and considered by council at a later date. As a member of the public, you are welcome to request to be notified of any future public or council meetings respecting this application. Please provide your contact information on the sign-in sheet located at the back of the council chambers. Please be advised that the sign-in information will form part of the public record for this application. Now I will hand it over to the planner.
So the subject property is located at 65040 Marshagan Road and is currently zoned agricultural A2. Property is 18.7 hectares and is currently being used for residential and agricultural purposes. The property was the subject of a surplus farm dwelling application that was considered by the Committee of Adjustment on September 19th, and they conditionally approved that application. So in order to meet provincial, regional, and township planning policy for surplus farm dwelling applications, the remnant agricultural lands are to be rezoned to agricultural purposes only, which prohibits dwellings in perpetuity. So this application proposes to rezone Part 1 from agricultural A2 to A2-64, and that's to recognize a reduced rear yard setback of 13.4 meters, where 15 meters is required. And then Part 2 to agricultural A2-1 and 65. And again, that's to prohibit dwellings and to recognize the reduced lot area of 17.27 hectares, where 40 is required, and a reduced lot frontage of 176.05 meters, where 180 meters is required. So this application and a notice of public meeting was mailed to the landowners within 120 meters of the subject property and circulated to external agencies and township departments on August 23rd. No public comments have been received to date respecting the zoning amendment, and Niagara Region Planning and Development Services provided some comments and noted no objection to this proposed amendment.
Okay, are there any questions from council members? Okay, seeing none, are there any questions or comments from anybody in the gallery tonight? Okay, going once, going twice. Okay, so I'll hand it back over to the planner.
So in terms of next steps, I'll be preparing a planning report and bylaw regarding the application, which will be brought forward at a subsequent meeting of council for consideration.
Okay, so in closing, if you wish to be notified of the passing of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment or of the refusal of the request to amend the zoning bylaw, you must make a written request to the clerk of the Township of Wainfleet. Okay, so now we are moving on to Mayor's remarks. So I would like to thank Enbridge Gas Distribution and the Fire Marshal's Public Fire Safety Council for partnering with Wainfleet Fire and Emergency Services on Project Zero. Thanks to their generosity, we've received 150 combination smoke and carbon monoxide alarms to help keep our families safe. I know that Chief Alcock will be working hard to ensure these life-saving devices get into the homes that need them within the township. And they were here just before council. We did a quick photo with them and thanked them. So there is a candidate meet and greet tomorrow evening from 7 to 9 p.m. at Winger Church. And then on Thursday, the Chamber of Commerce is hosting a debate for all the mayoral candidates at 6:30 at William E. Brown School. And all attendees are encouraged to bring non-perishable food donations in support of the Port Cares Reach Out Center Food Bank. Want to congratulate Mark Tardif, and he's not here, on earning his Part 3 from the Ontario Association of Property Standards Officer, making him a certified property standards officer. So that's good news. The township office and facilities will be closed on Monday in recognition of Thanksgiving. Mayor's story time. My final mayor's story time, I'm going to have to make it good, is scheduled for Monday, October 15th in the community hall. And the municipal and school board elections will be held on Monday, October 22nd. Electors are asked to please place completed ballot kits in return mail by Thursday, October 11th, 2018. In the event of postal disruption, ballots can be submitted directly to the township during regular business hours or in the after-hours mail slot at any time. And our next regular council meeting will be on Tuesday, November 13th. So that is it for my mayor's remarks, so I will look at the clerk to adopt the minutes.
That the minutes of the regular meeting of council held on September 18, 2018 be adopted as circulated.
So I need a mover and a seconder for the minutes, moved by Alderman Dykstra, seconded by Alderman Hessels. Any errors or omissions on the minutes? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, and that's carried.
That administrative staff report ASR-029-2018, read 2017 auditor's report and 2017 draft financial report and the recommendations contained therein be adopted as circulated.
So I need a mover and a seconder for that, and then we'll get Adam to do a presentation. So moved by Alderman Gilmore, seconded by Alderman Hessels, and now I will hand it over to Adam.
So thank you, and I'm just going to do a brief kind of overview of the purpose and importance of audited financial statements, and then highlight some of the key figures from the Township's 2017 financial statements. So what is a financial statement audit? An external financial statement audit is an examination of the records and financial statements of an organization by an independent licensed auditor to determine whether the organization's financial information is presented in accordance with the applicable financial reporting and regulatory framework. So on an annual basis, the township is legislatively required to undergo an external financial statement audit as prescribed by the Municipal Act sections 294 and 296. What does the auditor do? The auditor gathers the appropriate evidence, informs and expresses an opinion on whether the financial statements comply with the appropriate accounting standards and fairly reflect the organization's financial performance and financial position. So the Township of Wainfleet's financial statement auditors are Grant Thornton, and the accounting standards that our financial statements are presented under our Canadian public sector accounting standards. So all municipalities in Canada must prepare their financial statements in accordance with these standards, so it allows for some comparability between the different municipalities. So the roles of council, management, and the auditor. So council is responsible for reviewing and approving the draft financial statements and overseeing management to ensure that the internal controls are established and maintained. Management is responsible for maintaining adequate accounting records, maintaining internal controls to prevent or detect errors or irregularities, including fraud, and preparing the financial statements in accordance with the statutory requirements so that the statements fairly reflect the organization's financial performance and financial position. The auditor is responsible for providing an opinion on whether or to which extent the financial statements fairly reflect the financial performance and financial position of the organization. So what assurance does an audit aim to provide? So when you're looking at the financial statements in the auditor report and their opinion, the audit aims to provide a reasonable level of assurance. And what reasonable assurance is, it's a very high level of assurance, but it's not absolute. And what I mean by this is that the auditors don't audit every single item for the township. This would be too cost and time prohibitive to do, so they perform test samples of audits, which results in them not being able to provide absolute assurance, but that's how the Canadian auditing standards work. And the audit opinion itself is expressed positively, conveying that in the auditor's opinion, the organization is or is not compliant in all material respects. So when you look at the draft audit opinion that's included in the auditor's results presentation, you'll notice that on page 2, the auditor's opinion states that the consolidated financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects. The consolidated financial position of the corporation of the Township of Wainfleet as at December 31st, 2017, and the results of its operations, changes in net assets and cash flow for the year then ended in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards. So what does all that mean? So basically what they're issuing for us is an unmodified audit opinion, which essentially is a clean audit opinion. So this is the prescribed language under Canadian auditing standards that auditing firms are supposed to be using when they're issuing a clean audit opinion for their audit clients. When you look at the auditor's results presentation, so they've highlighted some areas of audit focus as part of their audit. These included fraud risks from revenue recognition and from management override of controls and segregation of duties. So these two, well, seemingly scary when it talks about fraud. These are required under the Canadian auditing standards for all audits of any type of entity in Canada. So you will see these on every audit plan that an auditor is doing. The other ones, tax revenue and receivables, purchases and payables, provisions for employee benefits and commitments and contingencies, these are all typical for any municipal audit that you would see. And basically that makes sense given that tax revenue and the receivables related to it are our largest source of income, and purchases and payables are our greatest expense. Employee future benefits is an estimate, and any estimates are the auditors will look at. You will notice in their audit results presentation that they've concluded on all the tests that they performed on these areas, and their conclusion was that there were no significant findings as a result of the procedures they performed. So again, this is the prescribed language that or audit speak that the auditors have to use when they're summarizing their results of the tests that they performed. In terms of adjustments and uncorrected misstatements, there were no uncorrected misstatements identified as part of the audit, and there was one adjustment with respect to employee future benefits that the township corrected. It's actually a favorable adjustment for us, reducing our employee future benefit liability by roughly $37,000. And again, employee future benefits, it's a fairly complex estimate. And you'll see in their internal control letter that they are suggesting that the township explore the possibility of hiring an actuary to help assist with that calculation due to its complexity. Appendix C of the audit results presentations is the internal control letter. The main internal control items identified relate to the segregation of duties around finance and IT. And again, these are the same comments that you would have seen in past audit results presentations for the township and are to be expected given the size of our organization and our staff force. It's often very difficult for an organization of our size to fully segregate all the different roles and responsibilities to satisfy the auditors to the extent that they would want to be able to lift kind of these comments to just highlight the facts. Again, there's one key new one that they've added, and that relates to the suggestion of us hiring an actuary to assist with the employee future benefits calculation. So that's it in terms of the auditor's presentation, and then I'll just do a few key financial statement highlights. So in terms of the statement of operations, this presents the sources and uses of the township's operating financial resources and that are recognized in the reporting period. So as of December 31st, 2017. Total revenue for 2017 was $1 million higher than in 2016, increasing from $7.3 million to $8.3 million. And this increase was largely a result of the township receiving a one-time settlement for road repairs as part of a road use agreement. Our main sources of revenue are taxation revenue, user fees and charges, grants that we receive from both the federal and provincial governments, as well as permits. Those are our primary sources of revenue. In terms of operating expenses, total operating expenses are $100,000 higher than in 2016, increasing from $6.8 million to $6.9 million. And this increase is attributable to the increase in amortization or depreciation expense. This represents the value of tangible capital assets that were consumed during the year. Amortization increased due to $3 million in new assets being recorded during 2017, And the amortization expense, again, is a non-cash in nature, and so what that means is there's no outlay of resources related to this expense. So some other key fluctuations year over year, there was a $300,000 increase in salaries and benefits, primarily due to an increased headcount in 2017, a cost of living adjustment of 1.6%, and increased benefit rates of 0.5%. Offsetting that was a $300,000 decrease in materials and supplies, primarily due to one-time professional fees incurred in 2016 that were not again incurred in 2017. In terms of the statement of financial position, so this reports the township's assets, liabilities, and accumulated surplus. Some key items to note, so there's a decrease in cash from $3.1 million in 2016 to $2.5 million. And again, this is largely driven by the acquisition of tangible capital assets in excess of cash generated from operations. So again, this goes back to some of our capital budget was planned to issue debt, and we're in the process of issuing that debt. So right now we essentially cash flowed the money, which we'll then get back when the debt is issued. There was an increase in accounts receivable from $600,000 to $900,000 in 2017, and this is just due to outstanding HST returns that have subsequently been received in 2018. There was a decrease in accounts payable from $1.2 million to $1 million, and again, this is largely due to the timing of invoices that were received and paid. If you recall, back in 2016, that was when the arena project really ramped up, so there was a lot of outstanding invoices with respect to that project in 2016. And then finally, the net book value of tangible capital assets has increased by $1.8 million, and that's the $3 million in additions, offset partially by a $1.2 million amortization expense. So the key line to look at here when you're looking at the statement of financial position is the net financial assets line, and essentially that's our financial assets of cash, investments, receivables, minus our liabilities, so our accounts payable, deferred revenue, employee future benefits, and other liabilities generated from the township's operations and activities of capital projects. And this is a key indicator of the township's ability to manage its cash resources and meet its financial obligations. So we're in a net financial asset position. Very many municipalities are oftentimes in a net debt position, which is still fine. But what a net financial asset position suggests is that we are fully able to meet our current and future obligations with our financial assets as they stand. In terms of accumulated surplus, for 2017, the ending balance is $17.3 million. This is the primary indicator of the financial resources the municipality has available to provide future services. It consists of both cash and non-cash components. In fact, 86% of the township's accumulated surplus represents our investment in capital assets, so that's non-cash. So it's just physical assets that we have available to provide future services. So that's the end of my presentation. If there are any questions from council.
Are there any questions from council? Okay, seeing none, thank you for the presentation, Adam. Any discussion from council members? Okay, seeing none then, I will call the question. All those in favor? And that is carried. So now we're moving on to the next staff report.
That administrative staff report ASR-030-2018 reappointment of auditors and the recommendations contained therein be adopted as circulated.
So I need a mover and a seconder for that. Moved by Alderman Gilmore and seconded by Alderman Dykstra. Any questions or discussions on that report? Alderman Conk.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'm just wondering if we should be putting this out for an RFP so that others can bid on it? Yes, no?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Alderman Conk. Yes, so we had a 3-year extension of our auditors that expired as of the end of the 2017 audit. What we're proposing to do here is just extend it 1 year to bridge the gap from the current term of council to the next term of council, and then issue an RFP to invite other accounting firms to bid going forward. So it's just a one-year kind of extension.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, and that's carried. Okay, now we're on to the farmer's market.
That Administrative Staff Report ASR-031-2018, Farmers Market Update, and the recommendations contained therein be adopted as circulated.
Mover and a seconder for this one. Moved by Alderman Gilmore, seconded by Alderman Hessels. Before I ask if there are any questions or comments, Richard and Kat from the credit union were hoping that they could be here tonight when this report came forward. I believe they might have a little surprise for us. So we were hoping that maybe this could be deferred until the next council meeting, if somebody wanted to make that motion. Moved by Alderman Dykstra and seconded by Alderman Hessels. So I'll call the question on deferring to the next council meeting. All those in favor? That's carried. And then now we'll go on to the next report.
That Bylaw Enforcement Staff Report BESR-023-2018, Monthly Statistical Report, August, and the recommendations contained therein be adopted as circulated.
Mover and a seconder for this. Moved by Alderman Conk and seconded by Alderman Gilmore. Any questions or discussion on this one? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, and that's carried. And then our final report.
That Planning Staff Report PSR-008-2018, Review of Mineral Aggregate Applications and the recommendations contained therein be adopted as circulated.
Mover and a seconder for this report. Moved by Alderman Gilmore, seconded by Alderman Dykstra. Any questions or discussion on this one? Alderman Conk.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'm just wondering if there's been any further movement on this file, and what will happen if we decide to approve this? Where is it going to go?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Alderman Kong. So this is just to endorse the process. So basically going forward, if council were to approve the staff report, basically it would authorize me to enter into to participate in the JART, or the Joint Agency Review Team, for this particular application for an expansion. Like I said in the report, that we're not a decision-making body. Essentially, the goal of the JART is to provide a one point of contact for the applicant, members of council, and the public, and to look at the technical review of such applications. So it involves things like the pre-consultation meeting early on with everyone involved, to establish what technical studies are required, outline policies from each of the agencies. So as I mentioned, a regional official plan amendment is required township applications, and eventually they will wind up at the ministry for their applications for the pit or quarry. So approving this report today will again just support the process that's been outlined by the region. But it's no decision with regards to this particular property or the process that will come forward as a result of that.
Richard, did you want to add to that? Because we discussed this earlier today in pre-council, so Richard has some good stuff to add.
Your worship, to Alderman Conk as well as the rest of council. Part of this JART committee, and it's going to be in Sarah's lap mostly, but most of the applications and the things that are going to have to be reviewed coming forward as part of the application are very similar at the region level as well as the municipality. So basically, we're reviewing the same thing twice. The region actually has a very substantial fee to pay for their review of the process, where we don't. So in our case, it would actually cost us money, because in Sarah's case, she's the only planner. So in order for us to get assistance to review some of these files, we will probably actually have to acquire assistance from a firm to help us review these plans. By participating in JART does not mean that this council doesn't have a say. Sarah will still be preparing a report to bring back to council on the entire file, But this helps collaborate an expertise that we don't have, and we can rely on their expertise, which we will be doing anyways. But then at the same time, the region will be paying the brunt of the bills as far as helping the process. Again, Sarah would still participate in the committee to review the entire file. We'll still have membership on this, and we'll still be part of the entire process.
So if I can continue. So is there any inkling that Waterford really wants to expand? So has that been made known to the township?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Alderman Conk, yes, so they are intent on expanding.
Okay.
Last discussion, they have, I think it was about 5 years left in terms of their current approvals, what they have on site. So now's the time, because this can be a lengthy process, now's the time to start looking at expansion, since they only have about a 5-year timeline left on what they currently have a license for.
And so one more question. So the expansion, are they looking at going across the road for expansion or further coming this way, west?
They're looking at going west.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay, other questions from council members? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, and that's carried. So now we're on to correspondence, and there's only one flagged for us to deal with, and it is every year Port Cares has their auction, and so they're asking for something for the silent auction. So Adam, you said it was, when we talked today, I'm going to paraphrase it, because the new policy isn't coming forward till 2019, if we want it to go ahead then and have a gift basket done up or something, that would be okay? Maybe I'll just get you to comment on
Through you,
that.
Madam Mayor. Yeah, so if you recall, when we made some amendments to our grant program going forward, it was more restrictive in terms of receiving applications for grant or for, in this case, a gift basket throughout the year. But since this is a 2018 request for 2018, council still has the ability to approve a contribution to them.
So we do it every year, so I'm going to assume that someone's going to want to make a motion to have Amber work her magic for, okay, Alderman Dykstra is making a motion to do silent auction table prize. Seconder for that, Alderman Conk. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, and that is carried. And then, so I'll look to Margaret for the bylaws.
That the following bylaws be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed the second day of October 2018. Bylaw number 050-2018 being a bylaw to appoint a Community Emergency Management Coordinator, CEMC. B. Bylaw number 051-2018 being a bylaw to appoint an Emergency Management Program Committee to advise Council on the development and implementation of the Township of Wainfleet's Emergency Response Plan.
So I need a mover and a seconder for that. Moved by Alderman Dykstra, seconded by Alderman Gilmore. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, and that's carried. Okay, so now we're on to notices of motion. Are there any notices of motion tonight? Okay, now we do have a proclamation. So Margaret, are you reading that? And then we'll just move in second and approve it. Excellent.
Whereas the province of Ontario has welcomed many peoples from around the world who have chosen this province as a place to start a new life in Canada, now as much as any other time in its history, and many of these immigrants undertake to learn English in order to communicate with their fellow Ontarians, allowing them to start and the process of building productive and rewarding lives in their new country. And whereas this diverse and multifaceted group of learners of English as a second language can be found throughout all levels of society in Ontario, whether they are students in school at any level, teachers, researchers, caregivers, volunteers, and workers business owners and employees, professionals and laborers all benefit from instruction in English as a second language and use that new knowledge to contribute to this province on an ongoing basis. And whereas the professional organization Teachers of English as a Second Language Ontario hosts a conference each fall in downtown Toronto that features professional development in the form of workshops, keynote speakers, and diverse presentations for teachers of English as a second language to develop, update, and expand their knowledge base, skills, and abilities to aid newcomers to our province in their efforts to acquire English language skills. Now therefore, Council for the Township of Wainfleet does hereby proclaim October 28th to November 3rd, 2018 as English as a Second Language Week in the Township of Wainfleet.
Okay, thank you for that. So I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Alderman Gilmore, seconded by Alderman Hessels. Any question or discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, and that's carried. Okay, so now we're moving on to other business. Does anybody have other business tonight? Looks like it's just going to be Betty.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Last year, I presented a motion to council that was deferred. That was the November 14th meeting of 2017, had to do with the MPCA. And now that it was deferred until the Auditor General's report was received, and that Auditor General's report has been received and read in Toronto. So I'm bringing this back to the floor. And I think it's important that two parts of the motion be considered. The first part being that a supervisor be put in place, only because at this point there's so little time left with the current board, and there are 24 recommendations that the Auditor General made, and the incoming board may need to have some guidance when it comes to getting these 24 recommendations looked after. The other important aspect of the motion I brought forward was that Wainfleet develop its own selection process, and they're due by inform the regional council that that's what we want to do, as opposed to just automatically putting an elected official in place. So I'm putting it out on the floor at this point. Do I need to read the whole thing, or what do you want to do?
I think, yeah, since it's kind of come out of,
Okay.
it wasn't on our agenda. So yeah, if you want to go ahead and read it, and then we'll get it on the floor, and then we'll get staff to speak to it.
Whereas the MPCA has reduced staff, which may have a negative impact on their ability to protect and preserve the lands which it is mandated to manage, and whereas the MPCA has taken other controversial actions that display poor decision-making at the taxpayer's expense and demonstrates an inability to operate in a transparent and accountable fashion within the standards set by the provincial government, therefore be it resolved that Wainfleet requests the Premier of the Province of Ontario and/or the Minister of Natural Resources immediately appoint a supervisor over the operations of the MPCA. If a supervisor is not appointed within 2 months, this council requests a meeting for the purpose of dissolution of the board as per section 13.11 of the Conservation Authorities Act, and be it further resolved that the Township of Wainfleet do immediately develop its own selection process for its representation on the MPCA board, which will commence after the next municipal election, and do notify the region of Niagara as the upper tier of our intentions.
Okay, is there a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Alderman Dykstra. So I'm just going to look to Will about what we can do. Can we make that recommendation? I'm not going to touch the supervisor right now, because I think that time-wise and stuff doesn't, council's within their privy to say we think that you need a supervisor. But in terms of our own selection process, because I know we talked about this when Alderman Conk first brought this forward. So is it not, where are we with the region with that? It's still that the region is the one that appoints?
Through you, Madam Mayor, that's correct. Under the Conservation Authorities Act, it's my understanding that the regional municipality of Niagara has the ability to, has the duty to make the actual appointments to the NPCA board. My understanding of the process is that following any re-election, any municipal election process, the structure of the board is presented to the newly elected regional council, and the municipalities, the members on regional council that represent municipalities within the watershed of the board are asked if there is interest from those regional councilors to actually sit on the board. If the interest is there and it is supported by the regional council, my understanding is that the regional council will appoint those interested regional councilors. In the event that the regional councilors are not interested in sitting on the board, my understanding is that the region then approaches the responding municipalities and asks their councils for a recommendation for an appointment. Those lower tier municipalities then have the option at the council level, if there are members of council interested, they can volunteer their names, and the recommendation can be put forward by the municipal council that a municipal councilor would like to be appointed to the board. If the municipal council determines that there are no members of its own that want to sit, municipal council, the lower tier, then has the ability to provide direction regarding the recruitment of someone other than a member of council. And that's really up to the municipality to do, whether it's through a posting and expressions of interest, request for an interest, an interview committee, whatever. So that's my understanding of the current situation. Now, I understand that prior to this motion coming forward, there was actually a staff report that sort of provided some of this information to council in 2017. And just from an operational perspective, that is information that you as a council may wish to review prior to sort of making a decision regarding moving forward with this motion at this time. Likewise, the report that was prepared by the Office of the Auditor General really hasn't been put before you as information. It was released on Thursday of last week. I think our agenda went out concurrently, so we clearly didn't have time to include anything on the agenda. So any sort of decision that you would be making might be without the full benefit or the full information that you might get from the auditor, the full auditor's report from the Auditor General, without that staff report in your hands, because your consideration of those items, you may wish to modify even further the language that Alderman Conk has put forward. So by all means, you do have the ability to sort of deal with these matters now, or if you wish, you can perhaps defer this to the next council meeting, where we can have the Auditor General's report on the agenda. We can have the other background information on the agenda for you to consider as well. And you may also even have an opportunity amongst yourselves as councillors to consider exactly what you would like to see in a process for appointments to the board that Wainfleet would want to use. So you could sort of wrap everything up in one sort of neat package potentially and deal with it on the spot. I just throw that out for your option and consideration.
Okay, did you want to comment, Alderman Conk, or I was going to go to everybody for questions?
Well, the Auditor General does recommend in one of those recommendations that the board consider other than elected officials. They are recommending that knowledge of conservation be one of the skill sets, as well as experience being one of the skill sets. So, I mean, that recommendation is there. I think it's an important one. Just because we're an elected official doesn't mean that we actually have the background or the experience to be sitting on a board such as the MPCA. So that's why I think that this is rather timely. And again, when the incoming board is met with these recommendations, because obviously the current board's not going to be able to do all those 24 recommendations in one meeting. That's not possible because the October meeting has been canceled, as I understand it. So I come back to a supervisor being put in place to make sure that these recommendations are all put in place properly. And an incoming board of non-elected officials, I'm assuming there will be some. However, they're going to need some guidance on how to move forward with most of those recommendations. I've read them all, and they're not easy. And for those inexperienced in sitting on a board such as the MPCA, they are going to need guidance, not just staff recommendations. So I think this whole, with the exception of the dissolution of the board, I believe that this motion is relevant and should move forward if we can move it forward at all.
Okay, questions or comments from council members? Alderman Hessels.
Well, I do believe we should move on the supervisory portion right away, and I'm not sure about if we have more information for the other part of, just so we get a little more background. Maybe there's some other options out there, but I say for sure the supervisory, if we could do that tonight, that would be great.
Okay, so we can look at maybe separating it, but for now, I'll take other questions and comments, and then we can come back to you. So Alderman Dykstra?
Through you, Madam Mayor, in regards to the original motion that Betty put forward, and she just alluded to it as well, I was thinking that if we do move forward with this motion, the only section that I would like to see removed is the divulsion of the board. If a supervisor is not appointed within 2 months, council requests the purpose of dissolution of the board, I would request a friendly amendment to remove that paragraph.
Alderman Gilmore, you.
The dissolution of the board is going to happen inherently. That part's redundant.
Okay, so so further questions or comments? Because further questions or comments before I make my comment. Alderman Dykstra, so I tend to agree with Alderman Hessels in voting on the supervisor portion tonight, but waiting for more information, because I just want to say to council that I don't disagree with having a different makeup of the board and potentially citizen appointees. I don't know, as you said, Alderman Conk, if it'll be all citizen appointees, but I think if we're going to say to the region and I guess ultimately to the province, this is what we at least want our board member, all board members, but our board member to look like. I just think that we need to be really, careful about that and take our time in thinking about it, because I know that in my past experience as a board member in the first term, there were a couple citizen appointees who didn't what's the word? They weren't accountable to the public because they weren't elected, and therefore I had some issues with the floodplain mapping. Moving forward, they seemed to just think the floodplain mapping was good the way it was, which we know. We had several stakeholders in the community who've worked tirelessly with other council members and with myself, and now we have a relatively good outcome pending with the floodplain mapping, and that took like 8 years. So it's little things like that I think we just need to be clear what that's going to look like moving forward. So I agree with Alderman Hessels that maybe if we take from now till the November meeting and really kind of even reach out to some of our community members who are a little bit more versed. We know there are several who attend all the MPCA meetings, so I just look at them and all the work that they've put in, and so I just think they share my concerns in making sure that it's somebody who's who's got the skill set, but also kind of knows all the issues and how they can impact the municipality and the other municipalities. So, so if there aren't any further questions or comments, or if you don't wish to comment further, Alderman Conk, then I'll maybe look, oh, Alderman Gilmore.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So just in light of Alderman Dykstra's comments, if we strike the last sentence in the first therefore, then that probably will satisfy what we want to do. I agree also that the selection process certainly could benefit from a modification, although it's out of our jurisdiction to some extent. So I hope that we can persuade the region to allow us to do that. But to tidy this up, if we take the sentence beginning with "if a supervisor" out of this document, then that, I think, accomplishes what we're trying to do.
Okay. Do we need to make an amendment then? More formal?
Through you, Madam Mayor. May I suggest we split the motion? We amend the first therefore to remove the last sentence, and then the second therefore we can perhaps deal with at the November 13th, defer that to the November 13th meeting of council, where we will include a full copy of the Auditor General's report on the agenda. We will include previous staff reports regarding the matter, and also members of council will then have some time to consider the options regarding the composition or the recommendation regarding the means by which members would be appointed to the board.
Okay. Can I see that? Because I haven't seen it. No, that's okay. So we're, because I'm just looking at this now, so we are splitting it, so we are going to vote first on the supervisor, and then we're going to vote secondly. Okay. All right. So we don't need to make an amendment right now. We're just, this is, okay. All right, so it's on the floor, so now we need a motion to split it. So Alderman Hessels, you're making a motion to split? Okay, I got this under control now, we're good. So I need a seconder to split it, Alderman Dykstra. So any discussion on splitting the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, and that's carried. So now, Alderman Gilmore, you wish to move, so the first part of the motion about appointing a supervisor, you're taking out that last line about the dissolution of the board. Okay, so that's moved by Alderman Gilmore, seconded by Alderman Dykstra, so that's just amending it to take that part out. All those in favor, that's carried. All right, so now we're going to vote on the supervisor, that first part. So any further questions or discussion? We're all clear, we're just voting on that one right now, and it's been a little bit amended. All those in favor, and that is carried. So now we're on to the second portion, which is Wainfleet developing the selection process. So a motion then to defer that to November 13th. So moved by Alderman Dykstra and seconded by Alderman Gilmore. All those in favor, and that's carried. All right, once I saw it, then I knew. All right, thank you. So that is done. So any other business?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I wasn't quick enough to catch you when we were doing correspondence. We had one from the province with regards to cannabis retail, and the municipalities have an opt-out date in January. Will there be a report coming to council with regards to that?
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, there will. That report that's contained in the correspondence is just a very broad, high-level announcement, if you will. We are actually in the process of getting additional information from the provincial ministries. We got some additional stuff today, and we will have some more stuff still coming, and a full report will be coming forward to council to consider moving forward.
Thank you.
Okay, any other business from other aldermen? All right, seeing none, then I will look to the clerk for a motion to go into closed session.
That council now move into closed session to discuss a item under section 239 2D of the Municipal Act 2001, labor relations or employee negotiations, a matter pertaining to the collective agreement with QP.
Okay, a mover and a seconder to go into closed session, moved by Alderman Hessel, seconded by Alderman Gilmore. All those in favor, and that's carried.